jump off?
Hello.
Oh
I
my.
can jump off like.
Hello, my
Can you
name
move?
is Emma. Hello.
Can I
My
try?
name is Emma Ruby. I know. Okay. Hello. Hello,
Wait a minute,
everybody.
guys. This cam was watching you.
Just be careful.
Hello.
Let's go back.
Hello!
Okay. All right, put it back.
Now, we're gonna sing a very special song! Hello!
Okay. Max, you want to try?
Ooh. Hey, what are you doing? Is this a loudspeaker?
Did you see Max? What's going on, Liz? Hi, Eli. Where are your shoes? Where are your shoes? Naughty, naughty. Naughty, naughty part. Naughty, 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 naughty. Naughty.
Hello, this is Raphael. Is this thing on? Hello? Is this thing on? Hello?
This is Raphael. Hello, this is Raphael's mama daughter. This is Mama's daughter. This is Raphael's daughter, Mama. Hello. Then we're gonna sing a song called Hello. This is Ruby Rose. This is Ruby Daddy. Mama. Hello, Mama. That's my Julia, but didn't know it's Donna. Oh, it's happening. So what's up? Hello. Buddha didn't know it's Donna, Mama. This is Buddha's. Little Judy Donna. Hello, baby Boo Boo. Hello, babysitter Noah. You are booty head. Hello, babysitter. You are booty. Hello, babysitter Rafa. Hi, babysitter Noah. You are kind booty.
Hello!
Babysitter Rafa.
Hello!
Booty. My baby is my butt.
This is sanctuary, so we don't say.
Who?
Hey guys, not the sanctuary.
You.
Nope, not the sanctuary, guys.
Hello.
Guys, not in the
I
sanctuary.
was just saying hello.
Okay, we weren't only saying hello. It's okay if you want to play, but not to say words like that in the sanctuary.
Yeah, so I'm allowed to say hello.
Hello. My name is
All
Hello.
right, Emma, 1 second, okay, honey?
No, let's continue speaking.
Hello. My name is Hello. And hello. We want to sing a special song, which is real special. So it's called Hello. Hello.
All right.
That was the song called Hello.
One last thing, and then we're putting the microphone down.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, that's it with the microphone. This is not a toy.
Where's the lecture going to be?
It's going to be in here, actually. Yeah.
Okay, hello again. Shabbat Shalom. Achaltem v'savatem. Did you eat satiety? I hope so. So, in continuation of our theme of Rosh Chodesh and of Earth Day, I wanted to talk about the foundation of a Jewish environmental ethic. Now, you might think that this is a totally obvious thing. After all, we Jews have one of our contributions to world culture is the idea of Shabbat, that we celebrate the creation every week. Right? There was not actually a feature of other ancient religions, the idea of having a day of rest every week. That seems to have been a biblical innovation. In other words, we've done a lot of research about the ancient Near East and about China and other ancient civilizations, and they didn't have this idea that every 7 days you stop and say thank you for making the world. And so you might think that environmental ethics is like an obvious outflow from that core concept in Judaism. And as we'll see, there are other Jewish concepts which have been marshaled to try to understand what an environmental ethics would be. But on the other hand, there was a sense that the world was, if not eternal, after all, the Bible says it started, it was eternal in the other direction, right? As it says in the book of Kohelet, V'ha'aretz le'olam omadet. The world lasts forever, and there was a sense that no matter what we do, the world will remain. And so in the 1960s and 70s, after Silent Spring, Rachel Carson and all that, and ethicists started to think about, well, what can be the foundation of a modern ethical imperative that has to do with the environment? They went back and looked at ancient traditions and tried to find, well, what do we have, And it's not as much as you might hope. So the core idea that we're going to start with is stewardship, right? So I'm going to pass these around. And I know the GOA students here are very advanced, but even they may not know the word stewardship. In fact, some of the grown-ups in the room may not know that word. By the way, will anyone be offended if I take my tie off? Okay, good. Whew. Okay, good.
You can even show us your
maybe when we get to the end, we'll thank you. So, a steward is a person who takes care of others, and the idea is that if God creates the world, and God is sort of therefore the owner, because creators are owners of their product, at least initially, that God then hands over protection of that object or that creation to humanity, and that makes us stewards, right? And so this verse from chapter 2 of Genesis, of Sefer Bereshit, says God took Adam into the Garden of Eden to till it and to guard it. In Hebrew, Vayikach Adonai Elohim et ha'adam, vayinachehu began Eden le'avda u'le'shomra. Now, those words at the end, it's really a kamatz katan here. It's a, it's le'ovda u'le'shomra. You know the word eved means a servant or a slave? Yes. Oved means to work, right? So to work the land. That hey at the end is actually a contraction. It's la'avod ota, to work upon it and to guard it. It's called a mapike, that dot in the hay. And so this is really a contraction. So God places humanity, Adam, into the garden, all right, into the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. And that word about guarding it is where we get this idea of stewardship, that humans are supposed to guard the garden. By the way, I'm not saying man here for Adam, because Adam is, at this point at least, an androgynous character. The first human is not yet really gendered. Right? It says later that Adam is lonely, and God eventually divides Adam into male and female. But at least initially it seems, as it says in the Torah, Zachar u'nekeva bara'am. God created them masculine and feminine. And you know how it's become common today to speak about the singular they? People who prefer not to be identified by male or female pronouns might prefer they. And a lot of people have a hard time with that because we think of they as plural, right? But there actually is some history in English of a singular they, even in Shakespearean English. And also, I think there's this deeper sense of gender as being something that it's not strictly binary, that men can have a feminine side to them, women can have a masculine side to them. There may be times when we perform our gender in a more sort of traditional way and sometimes in a less traditional way. So I think that what you've got here about Adam is actually another, it's not my topic today, but it's another model for how to be human in the world. The other verb I want to note is the first word there, vayikach. In the commentaries, the rabbinic commentaries, it says lashon ilui, the language of elevation, right? Because vayikach, to take, I take my glasses, lakachti et mishkafayim, I took them, right? But actually, the word lakach has more of a sense of owning something or taking it for yourself. And marriage is actually, that's the language we use for marriage. So-and-so took so-and-so to be their spouse. And so in one of the midrashim that I saw, it said, actually it's an extension of this one from Tanchuma, that God actually lifted up humanity and said, now you are not just a creature, but you're also a steward, you're also a protector. Right? And that's something that as we go from childhood to adulthood, we get more and more responsibilities. Right? Sometimes little kids, do you guys have pets, either of you? Max? Yeah? You have a pet? Yeah? Right? What kind of pet do you have? A dog. What's your dog name? What? Cole. Okay. Do you ever walk Cole? Do you ever take Cole out for a walk? Yeah. Okay. So you are actually taking care of Cole. Good job. Shkach. Right? And as we get older, we take more and more responsibilities. Right? Max, you don't take care of Cole all by yourself, right? You still need mom and dad to help you get the dog food and all that other stuff, get him on the leash and all that, right? But as you get older, you take more and more responsibility. And that's a little bit of what's going on here. God takes Adam and says, hey, there's this garden, right? Just like we have a garden at Golda Ak, right? You guys know Miss Jewel? Yeah? She's our Professor Sprout, for those who don't know. And she gets the kids weeding, right? And helping to plant the plants, right? So more and more responsibility. And it's a kind of training. And taking care of a garden or taking care of a pet is a way of actually training a person to be responsible for larger things. And in fact, all the great leaders, the biblical heroes, were shepherds first, you know? Like, so Moses is sort of tested in a way by taking care of these animals before he's entrusted with taking care of his people, right? In fact, there's midrashim about this, about a sheep that ran away, and he was afraid it would get attacked by a wolf, and so he was chasing after the sheep, and it kept going further and further until he found himself at the burning bush. And it was like God says, you know, I see how attentive you are to these sheep, I'm going to also entrust you with my people. So that idea of stewardship is very important. I'm just going to complicate it a little bit and say, some people read the Bible and they say, well, that's not the only model. There's another model, which is called in fancy language dominion theology. Dominion means to have power. And if you look again back at Genesis, it says, Urdu bidgat hayam va'of hashemayim. Rule over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air. In other words, God says, I'm making you the master. Right? So mastery. And there are people today, you hear it more in Christian circles, but I think there are also some Jews who feel this way, that say, you know, God made us the rulers of the earth, and we should do everything we need, take everything we need, and that's what God wants of us, to just be in control. And some people would go further and say, and God would never let the world, you know, go to ruin, because after all, it was a gift to us, you know. And I kind of feel like that doesn't make a lot of logical sense, you know. If you give somebody, if a parent gives a pet to a child, the expectation is that they'll take care of the pet, you know. It becomes their responsibility. So even with dominion theology, I think there's a place for stewardship. All right, so I want to share a midrash with you. This is from a late collection of midrash called the Tanchuma. You know, I don't like to assume things, so I'll just say midrash is a genre of rabbinic literature, which I'm sure you all know this, but I'm just saying it anyway for my own sake. And it's a genre of literature which is sort of taking the core of biblical text and then building on it. And there usually is something curious, a curious feature of the biblical text that allows the later rabbis to sort of fill in a gap. Like if the Bible refers to a person but not by name, they'll say, well, oh, who was that person? And then they can start to build on it. Or if the Bible uses an unusual word. Or if two different biblical texts seem to be saying something in tension with one another, how do we harmonize those texts? So that's like the creative space where Midrash emerges. And this is one of the collections called the Tanchuma, which has on the entire Pentateuch. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, I have it translated here too. Okay. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Abba, Nitava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Keshem sheyesh lo dira lamala, kach yeh lo dira lamata. God had this desire to have a dwelling not only in the sky, but also a dwelling on earth. What's God's dwelling in the sky? How did the Haftarah begin? Hashemayim kisi v'ha'aretz hadom raglai eze bayit tifnu li ve'eze makom menuchati. Right. So God says, the sky is my throne, the earth is my footstool. Don't think you can build me a house, right? You can't contain me, right? So very nice, lovely synagogue, by the way. I should have mentioned that, lovely synagogue. But God is not contained in this synagogue, right? And that was a bit of a rebuke to the kings and to Solomon, who thought he could build a house for God, right? It's like, no, look, I'm up there, right? But it is part of biblical theology, specifically the priestly school, what we call P, that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was a place where we kept everything pure. We took care of the Mitzorah. We prevented people who had all these afflictions from coming into the center. Then God would dwell in our midst. And so the beginning of this midrash is that just like God has a house in the sky in a way, so God should have a house below. By the way, this really is not working too well with like our idea of God as infinite, is it? Right? What does it sound a little more to you like? Anthropomorphic, right? And it sounds a little to me a bit like Greek theology, like where you had, you had the gods up on Mount Olympus, and then they would come down to earth and they would have a place to hang out there too. They would take on a human form. And it's possible that the rabbis' rabbinic theology is reflecting that a little bit. Or it's possible that Dira doesn't really mean the place where God lives, but rather a place where we experience God. I know that sounds very similar, but it's not the same thing. A holy place is a place where we become more attuned to divinity. That God can still be infinite, and yet there can be sacred places and sacred times when we become more aware. Right? So, all right, that's how this midrash starts. So God says, I want there to be a special place for me in the world below. Shekachu omer la'adam harishon. This is what he was really saying to Adam the first. Im zakita, if you have merit, kashem shani melech ala elyonim, just as I'm Lord of the sky, let's say, kach ani oseh otcha melech ala tachtonim, which is a little funny in modern Hebrew because tachtonim can mean underpants, but it seems like what it's saying here is that God is the master of the heavenly beings, like the angels, and humans will be the masters of the terrestrial beings, meaning other animals and plants. Right? So God is saying there's going to be this sort of these two spheres, and I'm deputizing you humans to be in charge of what's down below. Right? Shneimar, as it says, Vayikach Adonai Elokim et Adam. Right? And so this idea of stewardship, actually, if you read this closely, I actually think this midrash is a little messed up here, because it says first, God wants a dwelling in the heaven and a dwelling on earth, and then God says to Adam, if you do your job right, then you can be in charge down here just like I'm in charge up there. Does that actually hold together? I don't know. Does anyone else see a problem there? I'm the only one. Right? It seems like two different points that aren't related, yeah? Yes. But in this place, God has a deputy, as it were. Like God's not going to be hanging out all the time. So I need a foreman. I need a right, an absentee landlord. I need a store manager. I need somebody to mind the shop. Right? Yeah. What else?
Can I go back to the first line of
Sure.
the Torah? By looking at Rabbi Yanni Feinhu.
Yes.
The only word you didn't translate when you were going
Yeah.
through the translation was that word.
Yeah, he placed it. Right.
And I'm thinking that it might come from the root word of manche, to give authority over or something like that. So I think that if I were going to explain your midrash, I would go back to the word lahanchot and say that he is saying, he's deputizing him. I don't know, is that a Taj? That lahanchot gives him deputization, gives him authority over it, that they're not equal, but he's deputizing him for the other part.
You could be right, and I actually made a mistake. I didn't translate that word not only here, but also in the written sheet.
Yes.
So I apologize for
I
that.
don't apologize,
No.
but it's just,
No, I'm glad.
curious.
I appreciate the close reading. It should say, for anyone, what's your name again?
I'm Linda.
Linda.
Oh, yeah.
If anyone, just look at the translation. God took Adam into the Garden of Eden. It should say, took him into and placed him into the Garden of Eden. Right? So v'yanichehu, he placed him. Lahaniach is to leave something. But you're hearing like an association with another meaning. Lahanchot is to like sort of be guided, right? So like binot desha yarbit yanchileni b'maglei tzedek. God sort of no. I'm got. Binot desha yarbit tzedek almei minuchot yanachileni. No. No, it's not the same word. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about manchel, lahanchot.
Yes. I think those are more modern uses of the word.
That's who I am.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking that I didn't find them contradictory because it seems like God is saying to Adam, to us, not that, I own it above,
Right.
It's my place, and they come down, they keep some space from here,
Right.
but you own it below. In fact, God's not saying that. God owns it all,
Right.
right? And we could be in charge, but remember, we don't own it.
Yes.
If you rent it, you have to remember you're renting it, you don't own it. And so I think that by having the first line there, talking about the God having a dwelling place above, below as well as above, that keeps that in our mind that we don't own this. We're being given it for our use and what have you, but it's a very different relationship than saying, okay, here you own it and I do what you want.
I agree with you, but what do you do about Ani oseh otcha melech? I'm going to make you a king over the lower ones, right? In other words, maybe it's not the owner, maybe that's still a distinction, but it is giving humanity authority, right? And
But I guess it's how, and over time, how kingship has been viewed. So you have autocrats who have just assumed that they could do whatever they wanted. Other people who felt that being a king meant that you had to really take care.
Right.
And that it was really a big responsibility. And I'm thinking about all the stuff, about all the regulations about slaves. People say how terrible it is that their slavery is sort of sanctioned. I don't see it as being sanctioned so much as there's the acknowledgement that there is a slave, that people do have slaves, but you can't just do whatever you want with them. Again, you have to be stewards. You have to take care of them so that there's this relationship of caring and responsibility that's being set up. And
Well said.
In some ways, it's similar to what's going on here.
Good. In fact, just this morning I was reading an article in the New Yorker about the English Revolution of the 17th century in the mid 1600s, like where Oliver Cromwell came to power, and like the king was offered, the opportunity to remain king, but in a more constitutional monarch type of model, and he rejected it, so off with his head. But there have been, the term king has meant different things. The term slave has meant different things. Okay, three more comments, and then we're going to move on. Yes.
We're talking about God as the King of Kings. You can have
Right.
a higher king.
True.
And then also, even when there were Jewish kings, they always had the prophet over them.
Right.
I don't think the king ever has final authority.
In the recent conflict in Israel, over the court's power, there's been a lot of discussion. Well, does Judaism require a balance of powers? And Rabbi David Galinkin, who's a prominent rabbi in Israel, showed how the kings had the prophets to trouble their lives, and you had the priest, and you had at every stage, even in later Jewish history, you had an exilarch who was sort of more like a secular leader, and then the head of the yeshiva who was more of a religious leader. And so this polarity where you have like tension built into the system is a good thing, and having a government that controls the courts is not a great thing. Okay, but I digress. Yes.
Well, I was going to say, even though this is before the Ten Commandments, it seems to me that it raises the whole question of free will versus what our responsibilities are based upon God's stewardship or God's governance or whatever.
Right.
So I think this kind of raises, ignoring the word melech, because I think that's kind of fraught with other issues that I don't want to go into, but if God is the king above and then Adam is down below, what does that mean in terms of our responsibility? And where does our free will start and end? I mean, I think that's like a theme that goes through the entire Torah, from Pharaoh and from everyone else who does anything. Where do we start and end? Where does our personhood start and end?
Right there in the garden, because what does God say to them? Oh, you can eat everything in the garden, but don't touch this tree over here, right? And
there's still this implication that there's God over all of us and a certain ethical system. So, and are we 100% responsible for our actions?
Right.
So, just a question.
No, it's a great question. It seems to me that the tree of knowledge in Hebrew is called Eitz Hadat Tov Ra, right? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. And some people think I think the fancy word is a hendiades. It's like it's an expression that is it's like the full extent. It's from A to Z, So it's really not about moral knowledge. It's just the knowledge of everything, from the most good to the most evil, But it's possible that it actually means what it says. It's the tree of moral knowledge. Until then, they were a creature. We don't think of animals as being good or evil. We just think of them as doing their nature. But once you start to have moral reasoning, then you start to think of them as moral agents, right? And to be a moral agent, you need to have agency. You need to have the ability to act in contradiction to what you're told to do, right? And otherwise, you don't own. So the angels are not considered moral agents in Jewish theology because they're mumuna. They're just appointed to do what they're told to do. Whereas we, by our contrary nature, we actually gain both merit and demerit, And so I think that is a story where we go from this sort of simple state into the complex state of moral agency and hazard. Right. I'm going to keep moving because we got a lot more of justice. Yeah.
So I also see the problem you're saying that why does God need an apartment down below and then say that humans are in charge of it. One solution would be if you understand Dira not as a place where God dwells, but as a dwelling place for beings, then the one in the heavens would be maybe a dwelling place for the angels, and God gets to be the melech of that community.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And then down below, there's a dwelling place for all kinds of other beings, and humans get to be the melech of that Dira.
Right.
They dwell in the garden.
So God is saying, in order for me to have Dira, there needs to be order. Yeah, and I need you to create that order or to create that place. Maybe it's the Mishkan, or maybe it's a civil society with law and order, that type of thing. And when you do that, then I can dwell with you. Because when you don't do that, when it's tohu bohu, it's chaos down there or out there. I can't be there. Nice. That's great. Okay, so we're going to move on. So, I
may throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing.
So we're going to move on. No, just kidding.
I'm really wondering if I should ask you afterwards, because I'm caught with the anthropomorphism.
Yes.
It's so alien for me, because I'm thinking of God in the fullness and the wholeness, and we are part of, and in what I like to say, the dense God space. I don't know what to do with this, because it feels so Greek to me, and that's always been a struggle. So.
Yeah, well, I think...
But particularly this place of I'm sovereign above and you be sovereign below, and some people suggested So when God's not around, what do you mean when God's not around? God is everywhere all the time. That's what we learn also. So
Right, but we are gaining that from like Greek theology, which then Maimonides Jewishizes, but our ancestors certainly had a vertical metaphor. The god is in the sky god, and that was the ancient Near East too. Baal was like a thunder god, and so on. And you can say, oh, that's primitive, or you can say, well, they were starting their theology from their own lived experience, right? And they were ascribing to God qualities which they recognized. So I don't know if you guys ever sing Anim Zmirot here, but it's one of my favorite prayers, and it's got this line, Dimu otcha v'lo k'fi yeshcha. They imagined you, but not by your essence. Vayashvucha lefi ma'asecha. And so they just compared you to your deeds, what they could see in the world. And even modern theologians like Michael Fishbane has this beautiful book called Sacred Attunement, which is a very hard book, but he speaks about how you can only sort of do theology from your own body, from your own experience. Like systematic theology, which is this attempt to do a mathematical theology, is very cold and unconvincing. You really have to start from your experience in the world and say, how do I experience God in this world? Right? So I'm going to move on, but this is good conversation. I hope you think it's going all right. Is it going all right? We're okay. All right, good. All right. So if that's like a theological anchor, right? Then and that we have a job that God's given us in the world, right? Then the next question is, well, what happens if you mess up, right? If you don't take your responsibilities seriously, if you do damage, right? And generally speaking, the more responsible an agent is, the more we're going to give them, require them to pay for their damages. So, like, if I own a dog, Cole, yeah, and Cole's a good dog, right? So, has Cole ever bit someone? All right, maybe I shouldn't put you on the spot. All right, we're not going to talk about Cole anymore. Sorry. Imagine I've got a dog named Spot, all right? And Spot, and people with dogs always say he's very gentle, right? So Spot has never done anything wrong, right? But one day I'm out in the park and Spot goes crazy and bites another dog, let's say, right? So Spot was what we would consider a tam, innocent before that moment. But now that Spot has actually gone and bit another dog, let's say, Spot is now mu'ad, is now like, has been warned. We've been warned. Spot is a dangerous dog, okay? Not Cole, God forbid, Spot, right? And so that means that Spot's not allowed off leash, right? And that leash better be strong, and it better not be Max walking Spot. It better be someone who weighs more than Spot, and who's going to be able to control the dog. So when it comes to animals, if they are innocent, they've never done anything like wild before, and then they do something, then you pay half damage, chatzi nezek. But if they've already done something bad before, and they do it again, and you didn't stop them, then you have to pay full damage, nezek shalem. What if a person does something irresponsible and causes damage? Do you say, well, people are initially in that pure state, and then they become more responsible? No. This Mishnah says, Adam mu'ad le'olam. A person is always considered like suspected of doing wrong, right? And therefore fully responsible. Bein shogeg, bein mezi. Whether what they did was by accident or intentional. Bein er, bein yashin. Whether they were awake or asleep. And then it gives examples. Simei et ein chavero, if he put out the eye of his neighbor. V'shiber et kelim, or broke their stuff. Mishalem nezek shalem. Then he always has to pay the full damage. So when a person harms another person or their property, you always are responsible. And it's possible that if you did it like with intention, or you did it in a secretive way, that you might actually have to pay some aggravation also, not just replace the value, but double it. That's a whole complicated topic, which I'm not going into. But this idea of nizikin, of damages has been raised up as a possible basis of a Jewish environmental ethic, that we are responsible for things that have been put in our safekeeping. And it's a vast section of Jewish law, but there's one of the laws of Shomrei, of guardians, right? And it says that there are 4 types of guardianship. So if someone lends me their shovel to use in my garden, right? And I break it, right? So I'm responsible for it. They did me a favor. I didn't rent the shovel, they just loaned it to me. So I have a very high responsibility. What happens if I left the shovel outside and went in for a cup of lemonade, right? And I came back, it was gone, right? And the shovel was stolen from my yard, right? I could say to the person, I didn't do anything, I just left it there and someone stole it. It's their fault, not mine. No. If they lent it to you, then you have a higher level of responsibility. But if you didn't just borrow it, but you actually rented it, right, you were paying the money and it breaks, you might say, well, you're the owner of the shovel, it was going to break at some point. My renting it was sort of also including the amount of risk that was involved with your property, and so we've got these ideas in Jewish tort law that can be used for the damages we do to the earth, perhaps. But there's a problem. And the problem is what Hans Jonas was talking about here, which is that up until very recently, we only consider people responsible for the immediate impact of their actions, right? So if I did something that caused harm to another person, I know who that person is, I can see the harm, I can connect the dots. I drove drunk and then, God forbid, I hit something or someone, right? My action, my behavior, their suffering, it's all visible, within a timeline that's very proximate. But what Hans Jonas was saying was that now that we've entered this technological age, our actions are, first of all, not just individual, but cumulative. It's not really what Danny Nevins does. Me driving a car isn't actually what's going to destroy the earth. It's all of us driving our cars. And it's not just all of us in 2023, but all of us for the last century, right? And all of us for another few decades after is driving, let's say, gas cars. It's that cumulative effect. And then you could say, well, I guess since it's not only my fault, then it's not my fault at all. Right? And we actually do have this idea in Jewish law that unless you yourself have done the entire deed, you're not responsible for it at a negative level. So like it's the laws of Shabbat, for example. I'm not supposed to carry this watch from the public domain to the private domain. But what if I pick up the watch and Rabbi Julie's standing inside and there's an open window between us, I hand her the watch, she takes the watch and puts it down. So the movement of the watch from the public domain to the private domain was not the work of one person, it was a shared action, and we're both off the hook. By the way, and this is just my theory, but you know how at cemeteries when we're burying people, we rabbis always say, please put the shovel back in the earth, don't hand it person to person, and we have all these explanations, we're not in a hurry to... I think actually what it is each person should get full credit for the act of burial, right? So if you hand me the shovel and then I do the shoveling and I hand it to the next, no one has done the full action, and so that's like a more halachic explanation. I like the other one too, we're reluctant, we're not in a hurry to do this deed, but so you could say, well, that's a good defense. There are probably some lawyers here. Raise your hand if you're a lawyer. Okay, good. So is that a good defense? Like, well, I had a role in this, but like it's not all my fault, right? No. Okay, so the question though of what's it called, several responsibility or? Yeah. Okay. Good. So this is an idea that complicates the idea of nizikin, that we're responsible for the damage to the earth when it's really not an individual act alone, but it's a generational and it's even transgenerational type of damage. So that's why Jonas thinks that we need a new type of ethics. So I'll just read you a few excerpts from this book. In the previous ethics, I'm still on page 1 here. The agent and the other are sharers of a common present. It is those who are alive now and in some relationship with me who have a claim on my conduct as it affects them by deed or omission. The ethical universe is composed of contemporaries, and its horizon to the future is confined by the foreseeable span of their lives. So that, I think we all understand, I know that's philosophy is not easy to read. You can know every word and still lose the track there, but I think we understand this. The idea of conventional ethics is that it's contemporaries, people who are in relationship to one another. You stole my car, now you're responsible, right? As opposed to, you did an action which, together with the actions of millions of other people, caused a change in the atmospheric gases, which then caused a change in the temperature, that then caused storms to intensify, which then flooded a village, in a low-lying country on the other side of the planet a century from now, right? It starts to feel like, well, it's harder to say, well, I'm responsible for that, right? But he's saying that actually we do need to sort of shift our ethical understanding in that direction. So he says, new dimensions of responsibility. All this has changed. Modern technology has introduced actions of such novel scale, objects, and consequences that the framework of former ethics can no longer contain them. And he goes on, the critical vulnerability of nature to humanity's technological intervention alters the very concept of ourselves as a causal agency in the larger scheme of things, and that the whole biosphere of the planet has been added to what we must be responsible for because of our power over it. So this is challenging humanity to stop thinking of ourselves as atomized, but to start thinking of ourselves on an ethical level as collective. And maybe that's obvious to you, and you say, what's the big deal? But I think this actually was a new concept, right? That we had this collective responsibility. Although, yes, go ahead.
Well, I was going to wonder, how do we reconcile this with Kohelet, with Ein Davar Chadash,
Right.
Tachat Hashemayim?
Right. Ein chadash tachat hashemesh, or ein davar, right? There's nothing new under the sky. Yeah, so you're saying no new moral ideas?
No moral ideas, but just like, is this the first time the world has ever seen something like this?
I see. So I'm going to answer and say no. Okay, I think it isn't. And so now I'm going to backtrack from Hans Jonas having this great innovation. The second paragraph of the Shema, all right? The second paragraph of the Shema says that if you do what's right, then I'll give you your rain in the due seasons. And if you abandon me, right, then I'll make the sky like barzel, like copper, and the earth will turn to stone. It won't give its yevula, it won't give its plenty, and you'll perish from the good land which I gave you. It's what I call the climate virtue index. If it's a lovely sunny day, then we must be acting well, and if the storms are coming, then we must be doing something wrong, which perhaps was kind of a naive ancient worldview, but maybe not. Maybe it actually was exactly right. And the second paragraph of the Shema has not been very popular in the last century. A lot of liberal Sidurim, especially the Reform movement, just got rid of it and didn't include it. And even at Golda Aklik, especially the lower school, the kids love to sing the first paragraph, and we've got the first and the third paragraphs, but we've kind of skipped the middle one. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. So, why? It's longer. It seems a little redundant. It sort of repeats some of the ideas of the first paragraph, and it's got this sort of cringy stuff about being like driven off the land. That's very unpleasant. Can't we talk about something more pleasant? But I think that is actually an example where we as a humanity, or sort of the people of Israel, are responsible to do God's will. And if we don't, we are going to be exiled, alienated from the earth. Yes?
Yeah, and to that point, and I think you bring up something really interesting, the most successful legal action to affect the climate so far is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where the Constitution there guarantees access to clean air, clean water. And there have been successful cases that have said that ancient kind of constitution that could have imagined this technological degradation of the climate is in fact exactly what we should leverage to have access to a better climate. So I mean, with you on this, I understand what he's saying here.
Yeah.
It makes me very nervous to disattach our connection to, say, the second paragraph of the Shema or so much else, because I think that actually loses some of our ethical and moral credibility.
Right, that we have, it transcends us as individuals and
Correct.
applies to us as a collective. I heard that there was a lawsuit, my daughter, who's in law school now, said, maybe it was in Oregon, that some children actually...
I'm a resident of Oregon, yes.
What's that again?
I'm a resident of Oregon.
Okay, can you just very briefly tell us what the case was?
Yeah, so it's kind of along the same lines. It's absolutely worth Googling.
Yeah.
Some school children sued the state, basically using the Constitution, and said that their future was being degraded by all sorts of things, and this was unfair. And then they put, and I think what made it really interesting, specific damages on it, which it looks pretty compelling from a legal. I will defer to our wonderful lawyers.
But the children's generation basically suing the parents' generation and saying, you didn't do your job. You didn't take care of the planet, and now you're not gonna see the worst of it. We're gonna see the worst of it. And
there's a cost to that.
And there's a cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's similar cases in Europe too.
Are there really?
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so this is like an expansion of legal liability, which Jonas is trying to say is also on the moral level. And I'm saying that Judaism does have some precedent for seeing us as a collective with collective responsibility. Did someone else want to say something?
No, keep going. I can wait.
All right.
Here we go.
Okay. So on the second page, these are my words. The cumulative impact of human behavior across time and space creates a moral concern of human responsibility for other humans and creates a novel responsibility for other forms of life on Earth. So it's not just humans, of course, but the habitats of other animals. And you can say that that's ultimately self-interested. It helps humans to have other types of plants and animals on the Earth. Or you could perhaps go further and say other life forms have their own sort of right to exist. And it's a little like that parent-child metaphor that I gave. Just by existing, this, this habitat, a wetland that has all these sort of rare plants and animals that live there, that has no specific economic value for humans. But it exists, and does it, like a child, impose obligations on the people? Right? Does it deserve damages in a way? Like there's no bank account that that's associated with this wetland, right? But do we, so what does it even mean to owe damages to a non-human entity? By the way, I've done a lot of thinking in recent years about artificial intelligence and moral agency of artificial intelligence, and if you're interested in that topic, I wrote a long paper on that, which you can find on my webpage, rabbinevins.com. All right. So what? It's not 80 pages. I think it's only 50. All right. So okay. So I'm up to item 4 here. Jewish value, and I am trying to put it all together in a book right now, but I've not found time to edit because my day job is keeping me busy. So Jewish values and practices related to environmental ethics. So one is the land as a moral canvas, which is that second paragraph of Shema, but also in the book of Leviticus, there's several places where it says if you fill the earth with zima, which is like a moral turpitude, right? I'm not going to give examples for young ears, but if you behave in a way that's very immoral, then the earth will spit you out, literally vomit you out. It's almost like if you eat some bad food and your body says, don't want that inside, right? It's how the earth becomes. The land of Israel will spit you out if you don't behave well. And I think that's something that should give us a lot of pause when we see, some of the shenanigans going on politically in Israel. Like we don't actually get to keep this country forever. Like this is, we have it now, right? But we shouldn't assume that the fact that there's a state of Israel, or for that matter, the United States, as a democracy is a permanent thing. There's nothing to say it's a permanent thing. There's nothing to say that democracy will last. It's actually, every generation needs to continuously monitor and protect these norms and structures. Okay. The other is damages owed, even for your property doing damage, like if you dig a pit in your backyard, right? And someone wanders into your yard and falls into it, or their animal falls into it, you're actually responsible for that. It's not the same as going and shooting somebody else, but it is creating a hazard and therefore having responsibility, at least partial. Shabbat we talked about earlier, but I'm going to add now Shemitah. Shemitah is this sabbatical cycle, a sabbatical year. Every 7 years we're supposed to fallow the earth, right? And then Galut and Geula, exile and return. These are models more of like the biblical concept of history, of being alienated for the land and then coming back into harmony. And so I'm just going to end at this point, and then we can open up for a little more conversation, which is one more practice which is relevant to the environment, which is the practice of tshuva, of repentance or returning. The concept that even when we do the worst things, we can't undo all the damage we've done, but we can still come back, step away from the harmful behavior that we engaged in. We can confess what we've done wrong, and we can try to make restitution. Right? And then we can pray for atonement, which is, of course, what we do on Yom Kippur, but not only on Yom Kippur. So the other environmental prayer I wrote was for the Machzor, which it seems you guys use here also, the Lev Shalem Machzor, which is about from 2010. And actually, I wrote an earlier version of this prayer in rabbinical school at JTS back in the early or mid-90s. No, what am I saying, in 1989? I'm old. All right. No, I know, I'm a spring chicken. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to read this prayer for the sin of destroying God's creation, which I wrote on the model of an al-chet, like what we say on the high holidays. Elohei olam, ata barata shamayim va'aretz bi'ava, yatzarta tzmachim b'chayot, v'nafachta nishmat chayim b'vnei adam, nivrenu b'kerev olam, naki v'tahor, v'cha'et, נהרס לידינו, לא על ציקותינו אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו. I tried to not create a Yud Hey Vav Hey on the sheet, so that's why I did that, right? כי אשמנו, בזבזנו וגרמנו נזק כביר. החטא שמילאנו ארץ וימים בזבל ואשפה. החטא שהשמענו לנצח חיות נפלאות, שהצלתם מי המבול. והחטא שהכרתנו יערות עצים, מקיימים נפש כל חי. אנא אדוני, פקח עינינו ונראה את הוד יצירתך, אז נשבחך כמו שכתוב, ורבו מעשיך אדוני, כולם בחוכמה עשית, מלאה הארץ קניינך. הסר את לב האבן מבשרנו, ותן לב בשר בקרבנו, תן לנו חוכמה ואומץ לב, לשמור על הארץ מתחת השמיים. Eternal God, you created the heavens and earth in love. You fashioned plants and animals, breathing your spirit into humanity. We were created amidst a clean and pure world, but is now degraded in our grasp. Not on our own merits do we beseech you, Adonai our God, for we have sinned, we have wasted, we have caused vast damage. For the sin of filling the sea and land with filth and garbage. For the sin of destroying species that you saved from the flood. And for the sin of laying bare the forests and habitats that sustain life. Please, God, open our eyes that we might see the splendor of your creation. Then we shall praise you as it is written, how great are your works, Adonai, you've made them all with wisdom. The earth is filled with your creations. Remove the heart of stone from our flesh and give us a feeling heart. Grant us wisdom and determination to safeguard the earth beneath the heavens. Now, like I said, I wrote this initially in the late 80s, like 89, 90, somewhere in there. And we weren't really talking about climate change at that point. We were talking a lot about pollution, about acid rain, about habitat loss, those things. And so that's why the focus was there. If I were writing it today, it probably would be focusing much more on changing the actual nature of the atmosphere and of the seas, so that it became difficult to sustain life. Also, just to be clear, I'm using a style of liturgy creation, which is a pastiche in a way. It's like taking verses and images from different texts and putting them together. So that is, I'm not presenting this as all original material, like the idea of the heart of stone, and that comes from Ezekiel, for example, and obviously using the acrostic, the Aleph Bet Gimel for like Ashamnu, Bagadu, Gazalnu, as we say on the high holidays. I use that as a basis for Ashamnu, Bizbaznu, we've wasted, and Garamnu Nezek, Kabir, we've caused great harm. So it seems to me like saying, and this is printed in the margin of the Yom Kippur Shacharit service, around where the Al-Khaid is, in that Siddur or that Machzor. I'm not saying that saying this prayer fixes the problem. Obviously it doesn't. But it does help a community start to sort of get itself organized in a way that it can make a change. And with that, I'm going to stop because I feel like we've had a lot of good time together, and it's time for shluch for a lot of people. And if anyone wants to ask me further questions, feel free to come up afterwards. I'll stick around for a few minutes. But it's really been a pleasure. And Josh, you're awesome, man. You're staying up with all the big people. Yeah. Wow. I'm so impressed by you, Josh. So you keep leading Tefillah, you know? All right? We'll do your bar mitzvah one of these weeks here.
Rabbi Nevins, on behalf of the whole community, I want to thank you for being with us this Shabbat, and together with your wife Lynn, and also thank Andy and Sean again for helping to pull this weekend together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sean. All right. Sorry about the dog tonight. be in touch with me at centerpiece. I'm also very active in the community. I'm writing something about Jewish identity now, like multi-faith families and so on. I'm trying to write this book about technology and Torah. I got a publisher and I had like 5 friends to edit it.
Thank you again.
Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. All right. Yeah. Oh, can I shake your hand? All right. Did you have a good time? I love your people. I don't want to see you. Or you can go to there's a head of school page on the Aqua site.
I'll be blessed. Thanks again.
Nice to meet you. Hello. You're welcome. Unload, yeah. That's great. And we're not the owners, yes. Yeah. Your own body. Yeah, the Torah itself says in Leviticus, don't sell the land forever because you are not the owners. You are just like tenants.
And it's a very interesting concept. It's very
It's a good point.
And I thought that was very
Thank you. What's your name? Okay, Lisa Shalom. Nice to meet you. Okay. Here is